Do you remember the Looney Tunes cartoons on Saturday mornings? Yosemite Sam was famous for saying, "There's gold in them there hills." But Bugs Bunny would thwart his efforts to find that gold. Now maybe if Yosemite had come to the aptly named Gold Brook Valley in Cape Breton, he might have had much more success. After all, he would have been far from Bugs Bunny. Well, I'm not sure that I'm going to find the gold rush today, but I'm certainly in for an adventure on today's Walkabout. My journey today will take me into the Middle River Wilderness area in the shadow of Blueberry Mountain. The wilderness covers over 15,000 acres and is intended to represent Nova Scotia's interior steep slopes. As such, it protects a mix of ravines and highland plateaus in the headwater of Middle River, which sits between the Margaree to the west and Bedeque to the east. In 2019, this wilderness area was expanded and now stretches from the Cabot Trail to the Margaree Wilderness. With the connection to the Margaree, it won't be a surprise to you that this area includes spawning habitat for the Atlantic salmon. To the north of where I am now, the slopes of La Lake include much of an international biological site identified in the 1970s as a premier example of old shade-tolerant hardwood growing on steep ravines. This part of the wilderness is called the Gold Brook Valley, and in fact, the road that I came in on to get here, and in fact, this part of the trail, is called the Gold Brook Road. Now, that's because there is and was gold in these hills. Gold mining has been controversial at times, but nonetheless, it plays an important role in the history of this province. The Mi'kmaq knew of the presence of gold in this landscape, and there are written reports of early settlers in the 1700s chipping away at quartz to get the shiny metal. But the first officially recorded discovery of gold was by a British Army officer by the name of Captain Lestrange in Mooseland in 1858. 2 years later, Mi'kmaq guides helped another European settler find gold, also in Mooseland. The gold rush in Nova Scotia was officially on, and it wasn't limited to Mooseland. So a few years after the Mooseland find, a farmer in this area by the name of Morrison and somebody else by the name of McLeod found gold. They registered their claims, and in those days, if you found gold, you got free staking fees for 21 years. McLeod's claim was registered in 1864, and Morrison's a few years earlier. Despite the mid-1800s gold claims here, no official production of gold in this area was recorded until 1908, 45 years after that discovery. Now that's a little strange. And while Middle River and Gold Brook were not large producing areas at any time, it seems likely that gold was removed. It just wasn't officially recorded. So as you walk this trail, you find quartz all over the place, and that's one of the reasons why early prospectors thought they might find gold here. Because gold is formed when quartz-rich fluids enter rocks and enter the folds of the rocks during tectonic events. When the rocks cool, you're left with veins of gold. Scientists believe that all gold on Earth was formed in supernovas and neutron star collisions before the solar system was even formed. Now, if you want to know if you have real gold in the quartz rock you found, or whether it's fool's gold or pyrite, the easiest way to tell is to use a magnet. Iron pyrite, or fool's gold, is magnetic. Real gold is not. It was real gold that the prospectors were after, of course, not fool's gold. Now, there were 3 gold rushes in Nova Scotia. The first ran for about 13 years after that Mooseland gold find. The second came at the turn of the 20th century, and a third just before World War II, and public interest in gold ran high. There were entrepreneurs and businesses catering to the needs of prospectors, of miners, of anybody involved in the industry. because everybody was going to get rich. In 1868, Alexander Hetherington published a promotional book called A Practical Guide for Tourists, Miners, and Investors, and all persons interested in the development of the gold fields of Nova Scotia. The book had everything from a serious review of every mining district that had been created in the province to advice for those considering moving to Nova Scotia, and a chapter devoted to remedies for dealing with the pilfering of gold. Things were so crazy, an application was even made to search for gold on Sable Island. By 1889, the International Steamship Company was listing gold mines as tourist attractions for those visiting the province. The brochure stated, quote, "Many tourists will find a profitable and interesting diversion in visiting the various gold mines within easy reach of their boarding places." You can see the old Gold Brook Road has been washed out here at this ravine. It used to go straight across. Anyways, below here is Second Gold Brook, which is what I've been following, and that brook was actually the focus of most of the commercial gold mining in this area. In fact, Morrison, that guy who was one of the originals who found gold here, he made a name for himself cleaning gold in that river. So gold panning is how a lot of early exploration and early finds happened. In fact, it's really all Morrison and many others did. Now, the gold in the river comes from the erosion of veins upriver. Gold is then found by swishing water around in the pan, and the gold, which is heavier than other sediment like sand or rock, falls to the bottom. Panning is certainly how this area got its start, but it's not where it ended. After the break, I'm going to be continuing on through the Gold Brook Valley to see if I can find some evidence of how gold exploration in this area evolved. I'm in the Gold Brook Valley tracing the path of gold mining in this forest, gold mining that is now buried in the Middle River Wilderness area. This quartz is why they were looking for gold here. I'm looking to see if I can find any evidence of the former industrial operations that were once in this forest along this road. Only a few years after Morrison and McLeod's finds, large companies took their panning to a whole other level. An American company arrived in 1867 and built sluices on the Margaree Road to wash gravel in the river over the summers, but they couldn't make the commercial gold panning successful. By 1870, a gold rush of sorts had begun in this area, and people were testing all different sorts of sluices, pans, and cradles to sort gold from the river gravel. Some even tried an early shaft in the main river, but water infiltration forced them to stop. The largest nugget in the river was worth something like $15 in 1870 dollars, so a good amount. But more often, dollar nuggets were the thing to be found. In 1902, gold fever was still hot in these hills, and W.C. Scanton drove a tunnel into the hills to mine a deposit. Now, he was known for his good manners and exceptional penmanship. Unfortunately, those are not qualities that help you run a mine. He ran out of money and couldn't continue. So the Great Brador Mining Company was formed and invested in things like a steam engine, crushing mill, and other equipment. The machinery was brought into this area by horse and wagon right along this road. Eventually, these woods housed an office, bunkhouse, and other living quarters. You know, they say you can still find the old tunnels or adits that were constructed on either side of the brook here to get at the gold. And the first sign of that is this warning sign from the Nova Scotia Department of Mines and Energy, an old name for that department, warning you that there are pits in this area and you have to be very careful about where you walk. Abandoned gold mines are not unique to this valley. In fact, the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources and Renewables has identified approximately 8,400 shafts, adits, slopes, and underground workings, which were once a part of different mines. And that covers 700 different mining areas. Now, of course, not all of those were gold mines, but many were. I mentioned potentially finding evidence of the old mining operations, and in the river, which has washed away some of the old road here, there's some of the bricks which were probably from mining operations, and of course there's still lots of quartz around. So I'm just crossing the river towards some of the old buildings up here, and there are parts to an old rail line and trains. There's a spike here that would have been one of the rail tie spikes. The old rail tie is actually right here, and the pipe that probably drained water either off the mountain or out of the mine works is beside me as well. There's lots to find in these woods. This is all that's left of the narrow gauge railway that would have taken all the rock out of the mine once the mines became more industrialized and down to the Gold Brook Road for processing. Great Brador spent a lot of money looking for gold in this area. Unfortunately, they only came up with 3 ounces. Despite that, they continued to dig deeper, and results did improve. But then came the strike. Cape Breton's industrial history is full of stories of labor strife, especially when it comes to mining. Perhaps most famously, J.B. McLaughlin was pushing for better worker rights and better pay, better working conditions over in Glace Bay and Sydney at the coal mines. Now, the strikes that he led would not happen until the 1920s. World War I put everybody's focus elsewhere. But when he was beginning his activism, a strike happened at this mine, the Gold Brook Valley mine. The miners in the Gold Brook mine had been getting $2 a day, and the company wanted to cut those rates by 25 cents. The miners marched out to the sound of Margaree's Duncan Mackenzie on bagpipes. 2 years later, crushing here had come to an end. Miners say gold is often found in pockets, and when one pocket ends, you search to find another. Time is money, and eventually you have to give up. There was a little success in the few years after, but by the time the war hit, gold mining had come to an end here. So most of the gold mining that was done in this valley was done with level tunnels. They were short tunnels that went into basically a room where people would mine the gold in the vein, and when that gold pocket was exhausted, they would move on to the next one. For the most part, those have collapsed along this hillside. This one's an exception. This culvert marks the entrance to a much larger mine, and that's why that narrow gauge railway comes right up to here. It was 140 feet deep and had 3 levels. In recent years, this culvert has been put in order to continue airflow into the mine and ensure that it stays safe. From 1908 until 1916, 1,670 ounces of gold was produced here. What was produced prior to 1908 is hard to know since nothing was recorded. Who knows, maybe Morrison and McLeod took some gold home and never reported it. Let's not forget, Cape Breton was fairly isolated in the 1800s. The inspectors were not stopping by every week. Gold exploration did occur here from the 1950s to the 1980s, and some mineral claims still exist nearby. But no mining has taken place. A narrow gauge railway running out of the mountain into the wilderness. A reminder of the industrial site that this once was, and a reminder that Western Cape Breton was really once rooted in industrial work, just like the areas around Sydney and Glace Bay are now. At one time, there wouldn't have been an industrial Cape Breton in the Highlands. It would have all been industrial Cape Breton. This area has changed. The Highlands have become a destination for people for hiking, fishing, camping. the great outdoors, and this area is a perfect example of that transition, sitting here in a protected wilderness area. After the break, I'm headed north of here to a spot that sits atop a site where a group of investors are hoping to turn what was once just a winter destination into a year-round outdoor mecca.
Come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
You know, there's a lot of trails in the Cape Breton Highlands where you have to climb the mountain as part of the trek. Of course, there's other trails that go around the mountains and between the mountains, but there's only one where you take a gondola to reach the start of the trail. In fact, there's only one gondola in all of Atlantic Canada, and it's here at Ski Cape Smokey. And it's here on the short trail at the summit that I'm on my walkabout today. Ski Cape Smokey rises to 320 meters above sea level. From the parking lot, the gondola travels 305 meters, making it the ski resort in Nova Scotia with the greatest elevation change. In fact, of all the Atlantic Canadian ski resorts, only Marble Mountain in Newfoundland is higher. Built in the 1970s, the ski resort has seen its ups and downs. But in 2019, it was purchased with the intent of this becoming a year-round destination, making this one of the new, or at least renewed industries to take hold in the highlands of Cape Breton. Work is still ongoing to increase the number of activities here, but the new gondola runs all year, and one of the places it takes you to is a trail which departs across the summit from the landing point of the gondola. This trail is easily confused if you look online with the provincial park Cape Smokey, which also has a trail and is not far from here. This trail is 2 kilometers each way and heads to the aptly named Ski Lodge Lake. The summit of the ski hill lies next to Ingonish River, which itself lies in a valley between Smoky and Klondike Mountain. The river flows out to Ingonish Harbor. In the distance, you can see Middle Head, which splits Ingonish's Bay into a South Bay and North Bay. This summit and the ski hill is outside and to the south of the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. The first lodge burned down, and that was just the start of difficulties here. Over time, the provincial government subsidized operations. A group of volunteers also tried to keep the ski hill going. But it's very expensive and a lot of work to operate a ski resort, especially when the weather that makes skiing good, lots of snow, can also make it tough to travel on the Cabot Trail to get here. 8 groups looked at buying the hill and backed out before New York property developer Joseph Ballas and a group of investors purchased the hill in 2019. The investors have installed new snow machines in addition to the gondola, and they have big plans, including things like heli-skiing, a lazy river, festivals. They've even come up with a Czech craft beer made by Two Crows Brewing. And of course, they have plans for more hiking like this. Incidentally, the reason for the Czech-style beer is that Ballas himself is Czech. In New York, he is president of the Bohemian Benevolent and Literary Association, which brings together Czech organizations. Ballas himself escaped communist Czechoslovakia when he was just a university student, and that escape itself had ski connections. He was studying civil engineering in Prague when he applied to go on a student ski trip to Austria. He ran away from the group and applied for asylum in Germany before eventually reaching Montreal and then settling in New York in the 1980s. There are a lot of different animals that live on the mountaintop, and that includes the Cape Breton moose. which in fact is the world's largest living deer. Now, Cape Breton moose are abundant, very abundant, unlike the endangered mainland moose. But that wasn't always the case. Eastern moose were native to Cape Breton, but were wiped out in the early 1900s. In fact, by the time the Cape Breton Highlands National Park was formed in the late 1930s, the moose were gone. So Parks Canada decided to do a reintroduction program. And in 1947 and 1948, 18 moose from Alberta were relocated here. Now a very abundant species, all of the moose on this island trace their ancestry to those original 18. Oh, and there's a difference between moose in Cape Breton and moose on the mainland. They are a genetically different subspecies, which is why some of the now common Cape Breton moose are not relocated to the mainland to help out the population there. Well, this is Ski Lodge Lake. Now, the lake sits at 327 meters of elevation, which is 7 meters above the elevation of the ski hill itself. So I've climbed a little bit coming out on this trail. The lake goes from here, obviously we're at the summit, and runs in a river down the side of the ski hill. Now, a quirky fact, this lake sits at a point that is exactly the same distance from here to the bottom of the ski hill and the Cabot Trail there, and from here to where the Cabot Trail passes Cape Smokey Provincial Park that I mentioned earlier. Of course, there's no trail that goes from here to Cape Smokey Provincial Park. Now, this is a great location for a ski hill, and it's been recognized since the 1970s. 393 centimeters of annual snowfall on the side of a mountain next to a highway means it doesn't take much convincing. And while the gold mining may be largely done in Cape Breton, there are dreamers like Joseph Ballas who see a different future in Cape Breton's economy, one which is tied to the outdoors and adventure. Douglas Adams once wrote, "I may not have gone where I intended to go, but I think I ended up where I was intended to be." You know, whether you're looking for an old industrial site in a wilderness, or you're on the summit of a mountain which is being reimagined as a year-round recreation area, it's not so much the destination, but how you find yourself that matters. And I hope that's your experience on your next Walkabout.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine.